Hey, Andrew Woodward here, and welcome to Woody's Weekly Wisdom episode number 1. And what I'm choosing to do here is I'm going to each week, because there's so much going on in the world of finance and property, shares, all that type of stuff, thought why not come in and highlight something that's going on in the media, even though I tell you not to look at what's going on in the media. But the reason why I want to actually look at what's going in the media is to give you a perspective on what's really happening and what you really should be focusing on when it comes to managing your money in this difficult time and growing your money, growing your wealth, buying quality assets in a time where maybe there's a high level of fear coming from the media and other places. So why not have a look at what's going on and get a bit of an understanding and just give you my thoughts. And hopefully this works well for you, works well for me, and we can do lots and lots of these over the coming months and years. So you can see my screen here, and I've just highlighted this article that is talking about Australia at a huge risk of a recession, and the RBA warning they're warning that the RBA should halt rate rises. And if you live in Australia, you'll know that the head of the Reserve Bank of Australia is being grilled this week by the government about the 9 rate rises that we've seen over the last 9 months, and the fact that it's now starting to cause some stress for homeowners, and it's putting a lot of pressure on, obviously mortgage repayments, rents are going through the roof, all that type of stuff. And so the government's now getting nervous that the Reserve Bank might be pushing Australia towards recession. And the reason I wanted to kind of like talk about this article this week is the interesting thing about what's going on in Australia is when you compare it to what's going on in the US. So the US hasn't been as aggressive with its rate rises and is actually now reporting that its inflation rate is falling. Now, Australia hasn't seen that fall yet. Now, the rate of increase has probably dropped, which is nothing to be overly excited about, but our inflation rate is still going up. And we're seeing in the US, there's starting to come down. So why is that important? Well, Australia tends to, the old saying is that if the US sneezes, Australia gets a cold. If we're seeing the US inflation rate falling, then that could mean that inflation will start to fall in Australia. But I guess the big caveat there is that these interest rates are being, imposed upon us to stop us from spending, discretionary spending. But they're becoming a bit of a self-fulfilling circle in that interest rates are going up to try and stop us from spending. But because interest rates are going up, costs of a whole host of other things are going up, which is causing inflation to go up. So it's one of those self-fulfilling prophecies, which I think is why the government is nervous, because obviously in a time of rising interest rates and all the rest, people blame the government. And I'm not going to take any political stand here, but if the government is starting to get blamed for what's going on, then they're going to get nervous because they want to be able to stay in power. So what can they do, or what can we do to manage these rising rates and the higher cost of living, and how does that affect what's going on in your personal scenario? Well, I think we need to forget about discussion of recessions and higher costs of living and all that type of stuff, and become a little bit more insular. And by that, what I mean is I want you to focus very much on your personal circumstances. And the best way to survive and thrive through a period like what we're heading into, if we do end up into a recession, and even if we don't, money's going to be a lot tighter than it has been for a long, long time. So it's not going to be as easy to go out and borrow money. It's not going to be as easy to manage your money on a week-to-week basis. So the crucial part of surviving and thriving in this period is that you must understand your numbers. You've got to know what it is that is coming in and going out of your financial scenario. And the best way to do that is to have a plan and have use a tool that can help you. And we've got one. So if you want one of those, let us know, and we'll connect you up with that resource. But the really crucial part is by knowing your numbers, you know how much flex that you've got in your system. So looking at these headlines, the last thing we want you to do is get fearful of what's coming ahead in terms of potentially a recession or more interest rate rises. Know your numbers so that you know what impact all of this stuff is happening or is going to have on your scenario. And by knowing your numbers and knowing what flex you've got and what capacity you've got to do things, you then are in a position to take advantage and thrive through this period, because there's going to be a lot of opportunity to buy good quality investment grade assets, whether they're stocks or properties, at effectively a discount. So the fear of a recession, I guess, is that there will be job losses, and so you need to be mindful of that. But hopefully, given that this inflation scenario has been caused by some unusual circumstances like a war in Ukraine, which had a massive impact on the movement of goods and therefore the cost of those movements and therefore the cost of the goods attached to those movements, a lot of that should be able to quickly reverse once the situation stabilizes and hopefully ends. So it's important to, like I said, know your numbers, be mindful of what's happening in terms of interest rates. But if you know your numbers, all the talk about a recession should have minimal impact on you if you are tracking what you're doing and you're tracking your numbers and understanding what's going on in your financial circumstances. The media is going to hype it up. And like I said, with America seeing a significant drop in its inflation rate, that should soon flow into Australia, because 9 interest rate rises in 9 months is unheard of, which means they do have a lag. But once I think we get past the people have been receiving their first credit card bills for 2023, and once they start to get that second one, and the banks have passed on these latest increases, you're probably going to see people change their spending habits a little bit more aggressively, and that will slow down our spending, slow down inflation, and hopefully avoid any further risk of a recession. It has been a long time since we've had one, so some people might say we're due, but governments become a lot more wary of allowing the economy to go into recession. So it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. But I guess my message for you today is that there's a couple of things going on. Well, there's a lot going on in the world, but there's a couple of things that are slightly in conflict at the moment, or contrary to each other, being the scenario in Australia versus what's going on in the US and their inflation numbers. So I expect that we're going to see our spending, come back a little bit. Hopefully that sees inflation numbers slow right down and actually start to fall. And that can give the Reserve Bank some encouragement to slow down on the rate rises, which they're talking of 2 or 3 more to come, which hopefully we won't need. More than likely we're going to get 1 more, but let's hope that there's not much more than that. And let's hope that what we're seeing in the US starts to come and occur in Australia. We slow down our discretionary spending, and that takes the pressure off interest rates, and people can get back to a less fearful existence. So Hopefully that was useful. Please leave us a comment. Let me know if there's any topics that you want us to talk about. We're going to try and keep these current. So we're talking about what's in the news or what's happening in the world at the present time, so that you can get some of our insights on what we think is happening with the financial markets. Woody's Weekly Wisdom episode number 1, done and dusted. Hope you enjoyed it. Let me know down below, and we'll see you again next week for another episode. Cheers.